Now in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. So, good morning, everyone. Sorry that you're lumped with me again this morning, because unfortunately, lovely Thomas is stuck, confined to his bedroom, so that he doesn't give me or my child COVID. But I am actually just so honoured to have been able to lead the dedication for Alfie. That's just such an amazing treat. And you might notice around here that dedication services are going to be quite frequent over the next few weeks. And what we're doing alongside those dedication services is we're looking at devotion. And we started last week with Mark looking at Joseph of Arimathea. And this week, I'm going to be speaking about the devotion of the women who waited at the cross. So we can read about them in Matthew 27. And just to add a bit of context, in Matthew 27, Jesus has just died on the cross. He is being guarded by some Roman guards, and there are some women there with him as he died on the cross. And at the moment of his death, Jesus shouted out this amazing enigmatic phrase, which basically meant, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? And then he dies, and there is this earthquake. It goes dark. Some amazing things happen, like people rise from the dead and go into Jerusalem and just say, I'm alive. And it's this extraordinary moment. And so we join the passage in Matthew 27, verse 54, where the chief Roman guard, the centurion, is sort of processing what he's seen. And it says, when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. Many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So Matthew is telling us that there were women there around near Jesus as he was crucified. Mary Magdalene, as I said, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and Mary the mother of Zebedee's sons, the three Marys. In John's Gospel, which also has this account, he includes mention of Mary, Jesus' mother, and another Mary of Cleopas. Mary was a very common name. So there could have been more than three Marys, there could have been five, but that's not really the point. The point is that at the lowest point of the movement that Jesus had started, some women waited at the foot of the cross, devoted to their Lord. And these women had been journeying with Jesus for some time. Some had been healed by him. Others had supported him financially through his preaching and traveling. Others had just been really close friends, like Martha and Mary. These weren't last-minute recruits. They were his close friends. And at the end of this journey from Galilee, Jesus' home, was the end of the road for Jesus and these Marys, the cross. The place of Jesus' public execution, humiliation, and the end of any realistic prospect that things would work out okay. And also, these women had been through enough trauma in the days leading up to Jesus' crucifixion. He'd been mocked, abused, tortured, taunted, and abandoned by some of the closest disciples. And all of that was in contrast to these women that stayed. The word devotion in the Greek is proskaterio, and literally translated, it means to be strong towards something, strong towards someone. To stay there and wait as others deserted and cursed was to be strong towards Jesus. And so how can we teach these little babes devotion to Jesus? These strong women show us that it's about being strong towards Jesus, even at our lowest points. And it can seem strange to focus on the low points when we're thinking about tiny little babies who bring us so much joy. I was remembering on the day that Elijah was born, the first thing that Thomas said to me about him, because I hadn't met him yet, he was like, "Oh, Claudia, he's just been making me laugh so much already." And if you see those early pictures of Elijah, you'll know why. He looked a little strange. And if there's one thing I've learned about parenting over these past 6 months, is that there is this constant oscillation between joy and struggle. The high points and the low points can so often come at the exact same time. And sometimes the most joyful moments are born out of the worst struggles. And I was reading something the other day that was saying how strange it is that we make such a big deal out of children's birthdays. We did just now. We sang as a church to Jessica. And in many ways, a dedication is like an extension of that celebration of a child's birth. I was thinking about my first birthday, which probably will be a surprise to no one, was a little bit extra. The photos are ridiculous. It basically was a wedding. There was a marquee, there were canapes, and the context is that I was my dad's first blood relative that he'd ever met, so he wanted to make a bit of a big deal of it, but it was a bit ridiculous. And this article that I was reading was saying how funny that we really go into celebrating these birthdays when for so many women, they are the anniversary of a day of serious pain and being really close to death. We don't really like to think about that. And I think there are a few things that illustrate the relationship between incredible joy and intense pain than the birthday of a baby. And how amazing that it is this incredible metaphor for what Jesus did on the cross. This day of despair, of pain, of suffering, gave way to the most amazing joy and the reason that we've gathered here today. And maybe that's why these women were so instinctive about being close to Jesus and devoted to him. Maybe they know they've embodied what it is to have pain and joy at once. And one of my favorite stories in the Bible is another story about another Mary. We don't know if she was one of the Marys at the cross that day, but it's in Luke 10, verses 38. Jesus and his followers are staying at Martha's house, and Martha gets all stressed about it, but her sister Mary just sits at Jesus' feet so that she can listen to what he has to say. And I'll just quickly read it. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." And it's so interesting because in this story, there are two versions of devotion. The first is Martha, who we read opens up her home and is clearly making this big effort to host Jesus and his entourage. The second is Mary, who sits and listens. To be the kind of people who can remain strong towards Jesus at our lowest point, the kind of devotion, the only thing that's really needed is to have the one that sits at his feet and listens. Let's take the opportunity to be near Jesus. That is the greatest thing that I really think we can teach these tiny babies. But so often we accidentally sleepwalk into teaching people about the kind of devotion that Martha shows, which is, by all intents and purposes, quite nice. She's being an amazing host. But the thing is, what Martha didn't realize is that hosting Jesus is really simple. I mean, from a practical perspective, he can make his own food and he can bring the booze, so he's absolutely fine. But she didn't need to stress about that. But also, Jesus didn't need a perfectly clean environment, house to come into. He was born in a manger. Jesus doesn't need you to give him the fancy treatment. He'll accept tears to wash his feet. And it's the same for us. There's a great song that I really love called "Make My Heart Your Home" by Maverick City. And the lyrics go like this: "What about the mess in me? He was born in a manger. But what if I'm unclean? He'll make you new. That's what he'll do. What if I fall away? He'll hold you close. He won't let go. He's knocking on the door of your house. Let him in. Let him in. And they're quoting Jesus here from Revelation 3:20, where Jesus says to the church, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." Jesus is so simple to host. And the three Marys, these Marys that were devoted to Jesus to the end, hosted Jesus in different ways. They hosted him, as I said already, by providing for him financially, by receiving his healing. They hosted him in their hearts at great personal risk to themselves. This is an extreme contrast with the men who were having a shocker. And actually, Matthew 26 and 27 has some really heavy themes about how that despair for those men was manifesting. The despair that they felt was outweighing their devotion. And I wonder if we can sometimes relate to this. The grief of the men and women in these stories won't have been any different, any less extreme, equally painful. But when the men despaired, the women were strong towards Jesus. And at the moment, I feel like I can see a lot of despair in the hearts of the people of God and also the people that don't yet know they're loved by God. And when despair defeats your devotion, it will crush you, like it crushed Judas. But when your grief and pain and anxiety and trauma is held by, coupled with your devotion to Jesus, your strength towards him, even at your lowest point, well, you might find yourself one Easter morning in a garden hearing your name being called, like Mary did. Devotion is hosting Jesus in your heart so that when you are at your low point, you can be strong towards him. And all it takes is to listen to him. And Jesus promises us, like he promised Mary, when she chose what is better, it will not be taken away from her. So, it was just a small little thought today about how we can be devoted towards our Lord at those low points so that we can be there when the high point comes as well. And I wanted to finish by thinking about one other Mary, the Mary that was Jesus' mother. I love this little verse in Luke 2, verse 19, where Mary kind of is reflecting on the shepherds that came to celebrate him being born. And it talks about her storing up all these things in her heart. And I wonder whether it was those things that were stored in her heart that prepared her to stand at the foot of the cross while he died. Just the devotion of a mother. It was just absolutely amazing. And the thing that I wanted to think about Mary today was that kind of devotion is really hard to do. It was just instinctive. So we need to let him in order for us to be able to embody that same devotion. And I really think that's what we can teach the children. So I wonder, for those of you who feel that they need Jesus in here, that want to open the door, you need to be reminded today that Jesus is knocking, like it says in Revelation 3. Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. I just wanted to invite you again to open that door to him. It might be the millionth time that you've done it, or it might be the first. But Jesus is the easiest guest. He's so simple to host. And I think, that's one of the things we can teach our tiny people.